Ethan recalls this mission as one of the most unsettling experiences in his career as a demon hunter. This memory transports readers to a scene that, though ordinary at first glance, conceals something far darker beneath its surface. Ethan sat at his desk, reading over an email Gabriel had just received. It wasn't unusual for them to get pleas for help from people in desperate situations, but this particular message struck a nerve. The sender, a woman named Emily, lived in a secluded, small town. In her message, she recounted the eerie disappearance of her daughter, Bella, and husband, Michael, both of whom vanished mysteriously in the dead of night. She described how they had both disappeared without warning, leaving no trace. The doors and windows remained securely locked. There were no signs of a break-in. The police had intervened on several occasions, but the case remained unsolved. Emily wrote, "I can't explain it, but I feel as if something is here, watching us from the dark. I can barely bring myself to sleep, afraid of losing another loved one." As Ethan read these words, a chill crept up his spine. Gabriel, who had been reading the email over his shoulder, gave a thoughtful nod. "There's something strange about this one. Nighttime disappearances with no forced entry. This isn't just any case," he murmured, his voice tinged with suspicion. Looking at Ethan with a determined expression, he continued, "We need to investigate." Without delay, the two began gathering their gear, preparing for a stay in the small town. Their plan was to observe Emily's home during the next full moon. After hours of driving through dense, foreboding woods, they finally reached the secluded town, an eerie silence settling over them. The streets were empty, each road lined with darkened, shuttered windows, and the air carried a distant animal cry that only added to the unsettling atmosphere. Emily's house stood at the edge of the town, cloaked in shadows beneath a canopy of trees. The house was old, with peeling paint and cracked walls that hinted at years of neglect. Emily greeted them at the door, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. Her eyes, rimmed with shadows, betrayed sleepless nights and a gnawing fear. "Thank you for coming. I truly didn't know who else to turn to," she whispered, her voice thick with relief and fear. She led them inside, where the air felt thick, as if weighted down by an invisible presence. Ethan noticed the room cluttered with toys, yet despite the signs of family life, an oppressive silence hung over everything, like an unshakable shadow. Settling down, Emily began recounting the story of how she and her family had moved into the old house. The place had come at a low price, one that seemed almost too good to be true. But financial limitations left them no choice, so they purchased the house, moved in, and for the first few months, everything seemed fine. Then, one night, a sinister presence shattered their peace. Emily's daughter, Bella, vanished without a sound, her bedroom door locked from the inside. The police arrived, conducted their investigations, and left with no explanation for her sudden disappearance. "Did the police have any theory about what happened?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but his mind already racing. Emily shook her head, her eyes haunted. "They said it was likely a runaway case, but Bella's door was locked from the inside. How could she have just disappeared? They spent weeks investigating, but eventually they abandoned the case. It was as if they'd just given up." She paused, her voice trembling. But it didn't end there. "A month later, on the next full moon, my husband Michael vanished in the same way." Her words cast a chill over the room, and Ethan and Gabriel exchanged wary glances. The story had an unsettling rhythm to it, a sequence of events that hinted at something dark and insidious. Emily continued, explaining how, after Michael's disappearance, she had reached a breaking point. Desperate for answers, she took to the internet, looking for any information, any resources that could help her understand what was happening. She stumbled upon a forum where someone had shared a similar experience and mentioned Gabriel's name, which led her to seek him out. Gabriel nodded, his expression compassionate yet serious. "We'll do everything we can to get to the bottom of this. Tonight, we'll conduct a preliminary investigation of the house. Maybe we can find some trace of whatever has been haunting you." Hope flickered in Emily's tired eyes as she led them around the house, showing them the layout. She pointed out the basement, a place she admitted she avoided as much as possible. It's always cold and damp down there. Sometimes, I swear I can smell something. Something rotten, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Standing at the door to the basement, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle as if she were afraid of what lay on the other side. Gabriel gave a reassuring nod. Don't worry, we can handle it. In a quiet, desolate corner of the town, Gabriel and Ethan pulled up in front of Emily's house. The place had an air of isolation, with peeling paint and an ominous sense of abandonment that seemed to seep into the surroundings. As they stepped out of the car, Ethan took in the house's faded, dilapidated appearance, blending into the gray sky as if cloaked in shadows. The faint smell of mold lingered in the air, as though secrets long buried were starting to resurface. Inside, Emily's living room was sparse, the furniture plain and worn, while faded curtains hung limply, drained of color by years of sun exposure. Silence pressed down on them, thick and unnatural, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Emily's hands shook slightly as she poured tea, her exhausted face drawn with anxiety and helplessness. She sat across from them, her eyes pleading, her voice raw with desperation. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse and filled with anguish. "I didn't know where else to turn." She broke off, staring down as she struggled to compose herself, taking a deep breath, fighting the tears threatening to spill. Gabriel gave her a gentle nod, his voice calm and steady. "Take your time and tell us everything. We need all the details." Emily's eyes shone with unshed tears as she began to recount the memories of that dreadful night. Emily's voice faltered as she spoke, her face shadowed with painful memories. "Before moving here, we lived in rented places, scraping by. Buying this old house, despite its quirks, was our chance to save a little money and build something permanent." She paused, seeming haunted by a sense of regret. "But not long after we moved in, things started to change." Her eyes seemed to drift away, as if she were reliving a nightmare. "That night," she continued, her voice low, moonlight came through Bella's curtains, filling her room with a silver glow. Everything was so still. I had tucked Bella in, double-checking her room before going to bed myself. Her tone wavered. But the next morning, her door was locked from the inside. I knocked and knocked, but there was no answer. Emily stopped, inhaling deeply as though she were gathering her strength to continue. I called for Michael, and together we broke the door open, but Bella was gone. Her room was just as I had left it. No sign of a struggle, no open windows. Everything was exactly the same, except Bella was missing. Ethan noticed her hands tightly clasped together, her knuckles white, as if holding back the terror and pain from those moments. He exchanged a glance with Gabriel, who gave a subtle nod, signaling his shared concern. We called the police right away. They combed through every inch of the house but found nothing. They tried to reassure me, saying she might have snuck out, maybe to see a friend. Her voice grew weaker, almost a whisper, filled with despair. "But I know my daughter. She would never do something like that." Emily fell silent for a moment, looking down. When she looked up again, her eyes were glistening with tears. I kept telling myself Bella would come back, that maybe it was just a bizarre accident, that we'd find her somewhere. But then, a month later, Michael disappeared too, under the exact same circumstances. Her voice shook as she continued, "I couldn't sleep that night. I felt so uneasy. Something just didn't feel right. When I woke up around midnight, his side of the bed was cold. He was gone." She paused, struggling to piece together the memory. "I went through the whole house, but when I got to the basement door, it felt like ice was seeping through the cracks." Her voice dropped, her eyes distant. It was as if the cold was alive, breathing down my neck. Ethan's face tightened, sensing something sinister. This wasn't just any haunting. There was something darker at play. When I called the police again, they barely took me seriously. Their searches turned up nothing, and they even began to hint that maybe I was imagining things. Her voice grew bitter, tinged with frustration. They all thought I was losing it, and no one would believe me. No one cared enough to keep looking. Gabriel reached over, offering a reassuring look. You did everything you could. We're here now, and we'll help you get to the bottom of this. His calm gaze encouraged her to keep going, his intense focus unshaken. Emily's gaze lowered, her voice hushed. With no one to turn to, I felt completely alone. People in town avoided me, the woman with the crazy, missing child stories. She looked down at her hands, reliving the isolation that had become her life. One day, I came across a post online. It was a forum where people shared their supernatural encounters. One person wrote about an experience that sounded eerily similar to mine. That's how I found Gabriel's name. After reaching out to the poster, I managed to get his contact information. Emily's voice grew quieter, as if admitting something fragile. This is my last hope. Gabriel gave her a nod, his expression warm and steady. You did the right thing. From here on out, we'll handle it. Ethan leaned forward, speaking softly. Emily, you mentioned the cold in the basement. Have you always felt uneasy there? Emily shuddered slightly, nodding. The basement. It's always been strange, especially at night. I always feel like something's watching from the dark. Gabriel cast a contemplative glance at Ethan. Tonight, we'll do a preliminary investigation, especially focusing on the basement. Emily nodded, her expression a mix of fear and relief. Gabriel and Ethan planned to inspect each part of the house, beginning with Bella and Michael's rooms, then the basement, hoping to find traces of whatever might be haunting this home. As they prepared to start their work, the room grew even more still, the silence broken only by the quiet ticking of a distant clock. Felt as if the house itself were listening, waiting. After a brief rest at the town's inn, Gabriel and Ethan returned to Emily's house, intent on conducting a more thorough investigation. As evening descended, the house loomed darker, surrounded by a sinister quiet, as if the very air held ominous whispers. Emily waited anxiously in the living room, managing a faint, grateful smile when she saw Gabriel and Ethan's arrival. Thank you for coming back, she murmured, her voice trembling slightly, exhaustion plain on her face. I feel as if something's watching us, always there in the dark corners. Gabriel gave her a reassuring nod. We'll try not to disturb your family, and we'll go over each room thoroughly. Ethan observed the surroundings. The dim light seemed swallowed up by thick shadows, casting an eerie pall over everything in the house, as though echoing the dark events that had haunted this family. Gabriel and Ethan decided to start on the first floor, examining the living room, kitchen, and each bedroom, though there was no immediate trace of supernatural activity. Yet, as they entered Bella's room, Gabriel felt a strange ripple of energy in the air, a residual sharp chill that seemed to hint at something beyond the ordinary. Can you feel it? Gabriel whispered to Ethan, his voice barely audible. There's something off here, a lingering presence, like a rift. Ethan nodded, his gaze wary. It's as if something has left its mark here. They continued their silent inspection, moving carefully so as not to alarm Emily's family, and eventually reached the entrance to the basement. The basement, Emily had admitted, was the part of the house she feared most. Just speaking of it had brought a flicker of dread to her eyes. Still, determined to uncover the truth, she gestured with trembling fingers toward the shadowed stairway that led below. Descending the stairs, a dense chill seeped through the air, pressing against them. The dim light barely penetrated the basement, swallowed by the dark in a way that seemed unnatural. The walls were damp and crumbling, and a stifling, musty stench of rot and decay lingered, adding an oppressive weight to the space. Gabriel carefully examined the walls, brushing away layers of dust and grime, revealing faint, twisted symbols etched into the surface. Though faded, they were unmistakably there, ancient marks twisted and fragmented, as though someone had deliberately tried to obscure them. These symbols, Gabriel said, his gaze fixed on the markings, brow furrowed. They look like a seal, meant to contain something dark. But it's been tampered with, like someone tried to destroy it. Ethan scanned the surroundings, his voice low. Who would want to break such a seal? And why? Gabriel pondered the question, his voice thoughtful and grim. I can't be certain, but these seals are usually to prevent something unclean from entering or escaping. The damage here suggests that this house may be acting as a passage for dark forces. The evidence in the basement confirmed Gabriel's suspicions. This house seemed to act as a gateway, a thin veil separating it from another realm, perhaps a rift that connected with a different dimension. And it was likely during the full moon that this rift would be at its most vulnerable, allowing malign forces to seep through into the human world. It's likely that the next full moon will reopen this rift, Gabriel murmured to Ethan, and that Bella and Michael were somehow pulled into this other dimension. They returned to the living room and conveyed their findings to Emily, whose face turned ashen when Gabriel mentioned the rift. Her body seemed to tremble as she absorbed the gravity of what they were saying, a deep fear welling up in her eyes. We'll be here on the night of the next full moon, Gabriel assured her, to make sure this rift doesn't take anyone else. A flicker of hope shone through Emily's anxiety. Despite her unease, she understood that this might be the only way to rescue her family. Back in their rented room, Gabriel and Ethan discussed the night's findings in hushed tones, each more aware than ever of the danger that lay ahead. Ethan's expression was troubled, his voice tense. Do you really think this rift is a doorway for some dark force? The symbols don't lie, Gabriel replied, his tone cool and steady. They're crafted to hold back something foul, likely a malevolent entity that could taint the human world if given the chance. And it's our responsibility to stop it. Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of their mission. With their minds set, they gathered the necessary protective items and sealing tools, preparing themselves for the full moon and the revelation of the house's dark secret. As they stepped out into the moonlit night, their silhouettes vanished into the quiet streets, leaving behind only the silent promise to protect. They knew the night would soon bring them face to face with the unknown, and that this time, they might be facing one of the most dangerous encounters of their lives. As the full moon drew closer, Gabriel and Ethan's days in the small town passed in quiet tension. They stayed in constant contact with Emily, checking on the house daily and readying themselves for any supernatural events that might occur. Then, one afternoon, Emily called them, her voice a mixture of fear and barely contained excitement. Bella and Michael. They're back, she whispered, her voice strained. Please, come quickly. Gabriel and Ethan exchanged uneasy glances, understanding immediately that the situation was more complicated than they'd anticipated. They hurried to Emily's house, eager to confirm for themselves whether Bella and Michael's return was truly as it appeared. Upon arriving at Emily's home, Ethan's eyes were immediately drawn to Bella and Michael, sitting side by side on the living room sofa, both wearing expressionless faces. Emily stood nearby, visibly torn between relief and an unsettling unease. She leaned toward Gabriel and Ethan, speaking softly. They've been so distant since they got back, she whispered. It's as if they're not themselves. Bella, Michael. Gabriel tried addressing them, his tone calm yet probing. But Bella's gaze was empty, and Michael's eyes were cold, as though their souls were not truly present. There was not a trace of warmth or recognition in their responses. Emily looked at Gabriel and Ethan, her voice shaking. Bella was never this quiet, and Michael never this distant. A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. Did they mention anything about where they've been? He asked. Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. They avoid the subject as if they don't remember anything, or maybe they just don't want to. Days passed, and Emily's unease only grew. She noticed unsettling changes in Bella and Michael's habits. They often lingered in the basement, staring at the walls, muttering strange phrases under their breath. And whenever Gabriel and Ethan visited, their hostility was palpable. One evening, as Gabriel and Ethan arrived to discuss preparations for the full moon, Michael met them at the door. His expression was stony, his voice cold and edged with malice. You don't belong here, he said flatly. This is a family matter. We don't need outsiders meddling. Beside him, Bella stood with the same icy look, her gaze unsettlingly mature for her age, devoid of any childlike innocence. Emily glanced helplessly at Gabriel and Ethan, her face etched with worry. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "They're different. I'm starting to believe they're not really Bella and Michael anymore." Gabriel sighed, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll keep a close watch, but try not to alarm them. We don't want to provoke anything unnecessary." Fearful and desperate, Emily arranged to meet Gabriel and Ethan in a secluded cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. "They're back," she began, her voice trembling. "But they're not themselves. It's like something's controlling them, something I can't see. Sometimes at night, I hear them whispering, saying things I don't understand." Gabriel leaned forward, brows knitted. "If they're truly under some supernatural influence, we'll need to act on the night of the full moon. It's the only way we'll be able to put an end to this." His eyes scanned the cafe, ever watchful for any eavesdroppers. "We'll be stationed around the house that night," Ethan assured her, hoping his confidence would give her strength. Emily nodded slowly, though her expression remained one of grim determination. "Whatever happens, I just want this nightmare to end." As Gabriel and Ethan left the cafe, night had already fallen. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty streets. In the silence, they exchanged a look that communicated the same thought. The approaching full moon would bring a confrontation like no other. Returning to their inn, they readied their tools and prepared themselves mentally, knowing that this time, they might be facing a battle more harrowing than anything they'd encountered before. In the shadowed streets of the town, they were resolved. They would uncover the truth of the house, save Emily's family, and put a stop to the dark force threatening to seep into the world once more. At midnight, the full moon rose, casting a cold, eerie glow over the house. Emily lay awake, her heart racing, as if anticipating that something terrible was about to happen. The clock struck 12, and she heard faint footsteps drifting up from downstairs. Rising cautiously, she moved to the top of the stairs and saw Michael and Bella, their faces blank and unfeeling, walking toward the basement with her youngest daughter in tow, seemingly unconscious and led like a sleepwalker. Emily held her breath, terror clutching her heart, but dared not call out to them. Michael reached the basement's far end, murmuring some strange incantation, his voice deep and otherworldly. As the spell echoed through the basement, cracks began to spread across the wall, as if something unspeakable were attempting to break through. In her fear, Emily called Gabriel, her voice trembling with despair. They're opening something. Please, hurry." Gabriel and Ethan arrived quickly, rushing into the basement just in time to see Michael and Bella disappear into the rift with the young girl. Without hesitation, Gabriel took a pouch of salt from his pocket and scattered it along the wall. Instantly, ancient runes hidden within the wall lit up, faint red glows casting a ghostly light as if ignited by flames. Gabriel chanted under his breath, a cold energy filling the air, revealing the full rift's terrifying outline. With a brief nod, Gabriel signaled for Ethan to follow him, and together they stepped into the rift, entering an unsettling otherworldly realm. The moment they crossed the rift, Ethan felt a choking pressure in the air. It reeked of decay, and the surroundings were filled with a thick, almost tangible darkness that seemed to absorb every whisper of light. A sinister atmosphere surrounded them. Decaying wood littered the ground, and the faint sounds of distant cries and whispers echoed from unseen sources. Gabriel held his protective charm tightly, guiding Ethan along the shadowy path. "We need to find Emily's family," Gabriel whispered, his voice cutting through the unnatural silence. "This place is thick with evil. Stay close." They moved forward until, through the shadows, a figure emerged. "Michael." Ethan almost called out, relief rising, but the man before him looked warped and unfamiliar. Michael's hands were twisted, unnaturally long and stiff, his nails sharp and blackened like claws. With chilling slowness, Michael placed his hands on his face and began peeling off his own skin, as if removing a mask. Gabriel and Ethan watched in horror as the facade slipped away, revealing a skeletal figure beneath, with flesh decayed and textures resembling twisted bark. In its hollow eye sockets glowed a ghostly, malevolent light. "That's the evil entity," Gabriel murmured, his gaze unwavering. "It wears human skins, hiding in plain sight. Bones and rotting flesh surrounded them, the remnants of discarded skins littering the ground, filling the air with the stench of decay and blood." Gabriel realized that this creature had hunted many before, and that Bella and Michael had merely been its latest victims. "It doesn't hesitate to strip people of their skins," Gabriel explained in a grim voice, switching its disguise each time to blend into our world. As the creature extended its deadly claws toward Emily's youngest daughter, Gabriel chanted a protection spell, a flash of bright light shooting from his hand and striking the creature. The entity let out a hideous scream, turning its empty gaze on Gabriel and Ethan, snarling, "You dare to challenge me, mortals?" Gabriel engaged the creature in a fierce battle, while Ethan assisted, using consecrated water and protective charms to immobilize it. The creature roared and lashed out with its razor-sharp claws, a wave of dark energy surrounding it as it attempted to engulf them. Gabriel remained composed, pressing forward with his spells and weakening the creature bit by bit. Ethan scattered holy water along the ground, blocking its attacks. The intense battle drained them, yet the entity grew weaker with each passing moment. Finally, Gabriel saw an opening and struck, slapping a sealing charm onto the creature's forehead. It shrieked, its form twisting and disintegrating as its dark energy dissipated, leaving nothing but a heap of rotted remains. With the creature defeated, Gabriel rushed to the young girl's side, placing a protection charm on her forehead and whispering words of comfort to calm her soul. But when he looked at Bella and Michael, his heart ached. Their bodies were completely overtaken, their souls devoured by the evil entity. They were beyond saving. Gabriel exhaled heavily, knowing there was nothing more he could do for them. "Ethan, we need to take the girl and go. The rest, we have to let go." With the child in his arms, Gabriel and Ethan crossed back through the rift, emerging into the basement as the rift closed behind them, sealing the otherworldly darkness within. In the silence of the basement, Gabriel and Ethan turned to face Emily. She rushed forward, clutching her youngest daughter to her chest, her face filled with both hope and fear. Her voice broke as she asked, "Where are Michael and Bella? Will they?" Gabriel's expression softened with sorrow. "Emily, your husband and daughter were completely overtaken. Their souls were devoured by the entity. They can't come back." Emily's face paled, and she sank to the floor, her body trembling as she took in the crushing weight of the truth. Her tears fell silently as she whispered, "How could this happen, my family? My whole family." Ethan knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you still have your daughter. She needs you now. Even though you've lost so much, you can still rebuild." Emily looked down at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, and she closed her eyes, fighting back more tears. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her strength, rising slowly with a newfound resolve in her gaze. Gabriel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, advising her to leave the house as soon as possible to avoid any residual dangers. Emily nodded, holding her daughter close as she left the basement, each step carrying her farther from the horrors they had endured. After Emily left, Gabriel and Ethan finished the final sealing work in the basement. Gabriel gently ran his hand over the wall, confirming the stability of the spell's power, unyielding and resilient. As the incantation was uttered word by word, the symbols on the wall flickered with a faint light, gradually merging into the wall as if forever hidden between reality and the otherworld. "Done," Gabriel said heavily. "The rift has been completely sealed, and this evil force can no longer infiltrate the mortal realm." Ethan silently gazed at the sealed wall, his heart filled with complex emotions. He exhaled slowly and looked up at Gabriel. "We still couldn't save Bella and Michael." A trace of compassion shone in Gabriel's eyes. "Sometimes the truth is harsh. Not every life can be saved. What we can do is ensure this evil no longer harms others." Before leaving Emily's home, Gabriel and Ethan came to the living room to see Emily holding her little daughter, sitting quietly on the sofa. Her face was etched with exhaustion and pain, but her eyes sparkled with a glimmer of determination, as if after this endless nightmare, she had made up her mind to start life anew. "Emily," Gabriel said softly, his tone filled with care, "it's all over now. The evil will not bother you again. Leave here with your child as soon as possible and find a new beginning." Emily nodded slowly, looking at Gabriel and Ethan with determination in her eyes. "Thank you. Although I lost my dearest ones, at least my child is still with me. It's you who gave us the chance to live." Ethan held her hand and whispered, "Stay strong. You will move forward with their memories. They want you to live well." With tears in her eyes, Emily bid farewell, leaving the old house with her little daughter, embarking on the path of her new life. Gabriel and Ethan stood in the empty living room, silently watching her departure, a sense of unspoken heaviness welling up in their hearts. On the way out of town, Gabriel and Ethan drove through the dark forest, the night enveloping them in silence. Ethan looked out the window, recalling the series of thrilling events, his heart filled with complex thoughts. Gabriel, the evil entity we encountered, it hunts human skin, disguises itself as human, and even infiltrates the mortal realm. This power seems more dangerous than we imagined, Ethan said in a low voice. Gabriel focused on the steering wheel, his gaze profound. Indeed, this evil exists beyond the human world, taking pleasure in hunting humans. Their nature is ruthless, and the only thing we can do is ensure the seal is solid to prevent it from reappearing. Ethan nodded, lost in thought. The dark side of this world is far deeper than we imagined, and we have only seen a glimpse of it. Gabriel glanced at him, a hint of encouragement in his tone. It is because we have seen the darkness that we must steadfastly guard the light. Demon hunters are not just tools of combat, but the last line of defense in this world. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling an intangible force within him gradually solidifying. He understood that although each mission might face danger or even sacrifice, this was the path he had chosen. He was determined to fight alongside Gabriel, continuing on this path intertwined with darkness and light. The two drove silently into the distance, as if countless eyes were watching them in the night. Yet their figures appeared exceptionally resolute in the darkness. Gabriel and Ethan's car gradually disappeared at the end of the distant road, leaving only the stars twinkling in the night sky, as if silently witnessing the unresolved secrets and unknown fears in this world. As this chapter ends, Ethan knew that this experience would be deeply etched in his heart, becoming an indelible memory in his demon hunting career. Side by side with Gabriel, he continued their journey against the darkness, constantly facing new challenges and uncovering more hidden truths. Their future remains unknown, as terrifying and bizarre as this mission. Yet, they will not stop, for in this world, there will always be forces that need to be repelled, and truths that need to be revealed. In the end, Gabriel and Ethan, carrying all they had just experienced, drove into a new mission, embracing their unknown destiny. As they drove away from the small town, the sense of unease lingered, wrapping itself around Ethan like a shadow. He glanced at Gabriel, who sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Do you think it's over?" Ethan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel's gaze didn't waver. "For Emily, perhaps. For us, it's never over." Ethan's hand tightened on his seat as he realized the truth in Gabriel's words. Thank you for watching this episode of The Apprentice and the Hunter. Dark Forces Unleashed, Unmasking Evil. We hope you enjoyed this chilling journey filled with suspense and mystery. If you could choose one supernatural power for a scary situation, what would it be? Option A, see ghosts. Option B, become invisible. Option C, cast protective spells. Share your choice in the comments below. We can't wait to hear your answers. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.